I'm excited to have this conversation, an enviable position right now, I think, in this chair, having a conversation with these three powerhouse players. And when it comes to digital transformation in the restaurant industry. So when we think about the three brands represented on this stage, Brinker, just to give you an idea of the numbers, Brinker has 1,600 restaurants, 66,000 team members in 29 countries and 2 U.S. territories. Papa John's has 5,700 restaurants, 150,000 team members in 50 countries. And Taco Bell has 8,000, more than 8,000, I believe, restaurants, 250,000 team members in 27 countries. So when we talk about digital transformation and the brands driving it, it's these three brands on stage right now with me, and I'm excited to kind of dive in a little bit deeper. So, thank you for joining me, gentlemen. So when we think about today's climate of discussion, especially among the C-suite, right? You think about your CEOs. All of your CEOs are talking about technology, I believe, like never before. It is sort of a inflection point in the business, right? And where CEOs are really depending, I think, on technology and focusing on it when they're talking on shareholder calls and just in general in the press. So let's talk a little bit about what that means and what digital transformation means to you in your role right now with your brands, respectively. Let's start with you, Wayne.
It's super hot topic. Just left a leadership conference in Arizona last night, and the whole discussion was around tech and how tech covers. It's got its fingers in every single part of our business, which is crazy because we've said for years we're a people business, right? But it's very in your face these days. It's almost scary because there's so much tech that's coming at us right now as operators. I think for me, when I think about this industry and where we've come, I'm proud that it's 10 years ago we weren't talking much about tech, maybe a little bit here and there, but the progress that we've seen in the last couple of years have been just tremendous. And personally, because I've built my career around technology, analytics, data, the marketing aspect, it seems that I'm right at the nexus of where it's all coming. Right? Super excited. I do think the next generation of leaders for restaurant companies and brands will be either tech, intelligent, smart, on top of things, or tech leaders, because they're going to have to sit knee to knee with CIOs and have conversations about cloud computing, mobility, and some of these things that are table stakes now.
Right. It's no longer on the sidelines, that's for sure. Right. Justin, how do you feel about this moment in time in your role?
Yeah, I do think it's incredibly exciting. I think probably the most exciting piece. The rest of the leadership team is fully on board, right? And similar to that experience you guys had in your offsite, we were planning for 23. We're going through our list of capital projects and rack and stack, similar to probably what many of you do. And we almost couldn't find a non-technology driven project outside of maybe building new stores, and even that still requires technology. So, for me, a lot of when we talk about digital and technology transformation, it's almost more about how do you like upskill everybody else and bring everyone else along, and not leave like architecture in the background, and not leave sort of like the long-term vision in the background. I think that's what differentiates good from great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Vadim, when he just mentioned stores, obviously tech is huge front and center. Taco Bell, we just saw the Taco Bell Diffly location. Tell us about how digital transformation is really kind of upped your role there at Taco Bell and at Yum in general.
Yeah, I think if we look organizationally and how we function, we start looking more and more like technology companies. And I think that's just the reality. We operate in a product model, just like technology companies do. We hire and eventually lose people to technology companies, so we compete for the same talent pool. We partner with startups and sometimes acquire them and sometimes integrate them into our business operations. We create centers of excellence around technology, innovation centers and other things. And again, that's just a blueprint of what a technology company does, which is kind of amazing for a restaurant industry and for restaurant companies. I think Wade mentioned that 10 years ago, this would be unthinkable.
So it's a very exciting time for all of us in the room to be in technology and helping restaurants sort of live through this transformation. You all are at the forefront leading it. Let's talk a little bit about pandemic, and after it hit, we all had to sort of scramble and adopt these new revenue streams. I'd like to hear from all of you about how you continue to adapt, ebb and flow, and continue to kind of maintain really strong incremental revenue streams from other sources, from sources maybe you didn't even know you had pre-pandemic. So we'll start with you, Justin.
Yeah, if I could just circle back, I think everyone in this room is helping lead this. Walking through the exhibit hall yesterday, I was reminded about why I'm in food. Food is fun. Mm-hmm. And it's, if you think about all the realms of kind of, where digital has penetrated every single aspect of sort of the retail consumer environment, food is that one space where, you're involved in manufacturing, you're involved in distribution, you're involved in sort of that like personal connection with customers. And Amazon hasn't conquered that, in this space. And neither has Google and et cetera. They're partners, right? And just walking through like how different some of these technologies are, they're available to all of us in this room, as compared to just 5 years ago. It's amazing, it's energizing. So, but to your question, I think, it's really about revenue, it's about profit. So, when we think about digital, I think Wade, you mentioned sort of analytics. Like if you're going to be great at driving revenue, you have to be great at the analytics, because there are some orders or some modes of customer interaction through digital channels that just aren't worth it. And they're either not going to be a great customer experience in the long run. You won't be able to sort of maintain, the system, to your point, from a regulatory standpoint or just from a CX standpoint. Or, from a revenue management standpoint, that customer, may not be, the best one for you at that moment in time, or that discount that you're offering. So for me, like, it's less about just the revenue side, and it's more about how can we make our restaurants more money. And that's, there's no shortage of ways to do that these days.
Yeah. And so with the revenue streams that are coming in, what's new like in the last 2 years? I mean, we know successive is just wings, but what else are you doing sort of? I know you guys have started a few things and then pivoted a little bit. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about just what you see are the most relevant incremental revenue streams that you kind of are keeping strong right now through technology.
Yeah, I mean, so you guys, we launched those virtual brands. That was during the pandemic. We had toyed with a bunch of different things, and we'll talk about some of the projects that I've killed, because I think I've actually killed more projects in the last year than I actually started in the previous 9 years, right? Mm-hmm. With the brand. But the one that's interesting to us, we just switched over a new CEO that's come in and give fresh eyes to us. And my role has changed a little bit. I've gone from being the head of innovation to now being the chief digital officer and head of off-premise. And as I've come back to the brand closer and looked at what's going on, it just comes back down to this unbelievable place that we're in today as a casual dining restaurant, that 30% of our transactions are off-premise, right? So rewind the tape 3 years ago, our off-premise percentage was like 15. And here we are living now in a place where not only do we do multiple occasions of, hey, come drink at the bar, hey, come in and have a family meal and sit down, but now we're in this world of like, deliver it to your soccer game or your house, or, supplement your meal on Tuesday night. So the revenue stream that's most top of mind for us is, one, fixing that customer experience on our Chili's, specifically to our Chili's mobility and web experience, and then really going after incremental dollars that I see in the QSR space, right? Because for us, we're not trading as much in the to-go and delivery space as you're going to get with maybe another casual dining restaurant, because of the percentage that we're off premise. Really, the opportunity is to shave off pieces within the QSR space. Gotcha. And so we're super focused on, hey, how do we get price points that are sharp enough, but how do we also get good quality food that travels well, so that we're just one more occasion that you weren't thinking about, right? Wow. That's what we're really focused on the next couple of years.
That's fascinating. And about you, Vadim, I mean, I know that you all have done a lot with really cool marketing. I mean, you've always been a slick marketing organization, right? I mean, yesterday I was in a metaverse session and we talked about the wedding that you all did in the metaverse just a couple of weeks ago, which was so cool. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, obviously that's a fun, brand rich experience that you're creating for your fans, but what else are you doing with tech that maybe has brought in, I should say, new revenues that you weren't expecting probably pre-pandemic?
Well, I think just a huge transformation. We've been firing on all cylinders, trying to create additional channels on how to talk to the customer, the way they want to talk back to us and they want to order from us. So it's really kind of offering all these different options from, if they walk into a restaurant, there's a self-service kiosk, digital channel. If they order from their phone, there's an option to go direct with us through our mobile site or mobile app. If they decide to deliver, we can deliver from our mobile app or from a third-party aggregators. And we went with all of them just to cover as much ground as possible and as many customers as possible. But that requires a lot of integration. And it requires us to really follow these customers through on their journey, all the way from the order point through the execution. And then after that, continue that conversation. And like you said, things like what we do in the metaverse and what we do in other channels and through, partnerships with celebrities and other things, it all continues this one conversation. So ultimately, it needs to bring it back. It needs to connect with your digital strategy. It can be just one-off. And I think that's what we're trying to do, where the customers feel like it's in brand, it's authentic, and it's a continuation of that conversation, no matter which way they decide to interact with us.
So with that, let's dive into the technologies that you're using to accomplish that. Like, let's think about AI. I mean, everyone talks about AI. It's huge, it's buzzy, but it's also something, I think it's transformational to every industry, right? And right now in these times that we're living in. But what is it really tangibly doing? I mean, obviously, I know Papa John's, you guys are doing a lot with your call center and AI. So, you guys are looking at probably voice in the drive-thru and things like that. So if each of you could touch on just where you are with AI in whatever capacity, in whatever facet of the operation, and what's real right now, or what do you envision might be real in the coming, like, say, 2 years? Vadim, we'll just continue with you.
Sure. Everything that we look at is either what are we doing for our customer and what are we doing for a team member. And I don't want to leave team member behind because
Sure.
that's going to drive your customer experience. With AI, which becomes one of the levers and one of the other tools in our chess box, I think immediately. So we just recently had a press release on using AI for recommended ordering in the back of the house. That's something that requires quite a bit of technology to put together. You need to know your sales, you need to know your inventories, and you need a very tight relationship with your supply chain. But this is something where AI was just a huge helper and really helped us to shave off hours in the back of the house, which translates into a better service in the front of the house. That's just one experience. We certainly just as thoughtful about what we're going to do for customers. So.
Right. And there's so much to consider, opening yourself up to that technology, legal, privacy and legal and all the implications of that. Justin, tell us a little bit about AI and how it's infused into your call center or anywhere else in your operation.
Yeah. I mean, just like Vadim mentioned, years ago, digital meant, customer facing, and now it's team member facing and employee engagement oriented. So we use mostly unsupervised machine learning for improving our delivery time algorithms. When is that driver actually going to get to my door? When's that pizza going to be ready for me if I'm picking it up at the curb or at the store? We use it for product propensity modeling, and somewhat similar to you guys for some of the attrition modeling and next best order stuff. And we do integrate that into our kind of call center environment and other channels. I think voice AI is it's probably on the minds of half the folks here today. So we're certainly testing that and trying to do it right if we can. And then our CEO has said, hey, I want our pizzas, our papadillas, all that stuff to come out a lot more accurate. When we have teenagers and young kids, a lot of times making the food, accuracy can suffer. And so how can we, to put it mildly, to put it bluntly, right. So how can we leverage tech without it being a huge unit economic burden on the restaurant? I think that's the challenge. But how can we leverage this AI tech and edge computing to, via sensors and cameras to increase our accuracy? That's a huge horizon for us.
Right. I mean, I know that the computer vision has been bigger in pizza space in general, right? To quality control, and that's exciting new frontier perhaps in the future.
100%.
And Wade, how about you? I know that you have the Kitchen of the Future initiative that's really hot right now.
So we are playing with AI just like a lot of these other brands. We haven't got to the place of where customer-facing AI, we haven't deployed it yet in restaurant. We're using some robotic process automation. It's probably a stretch away from AI, but it is repetitive tasks that were being eliminated because of, or eliminated those tasks for people doing them, which has been a big help. We continue to look at voice AI, chatbot capability for our service desk capability to eliminate phone calls and different things. The Kitchen of the Future is really interesting because Justin talked about, either the lack of tenure or the youth of people making pizzas, right? It's very similar in the restaurant industry. You tend to get young folk, or you tend to get people who, maybe not be as committed or dedicated in the moment because they're kind of moving around jobs. That happens. So the Kitchen of the Future was really around how do we take our zone 2, and for those of you that don't know, the back of a Chili's, which probably most of you, we have a protein zone where we're cooking our burgers and our chicken and our salmon, and we're kind of, working that grill, and we've implemented a technology that uses time, temp, and pressure. Think of it like a great big George Foreman grill. It's not a great big George Foreman grill, but that's kind of the idea, right? This pressurized platen that comes down and cooks the food. And we're seeing tremendous cook time improvement, but more than that, it's push button. So everything is touchscreen, right? So in a world where it took 12 minutes to cook a steak and you had to know exactly what medium temperature was and how to make that work, now it's as simple as just pressing a button. And along that same lines is cavity ovens that we're using that now we've taken conveyors out that allow us to, again, push button, same type of technology. And it's the iconography that's really interesting because if it's Spanish or English, it doesn't matter because they know, hey, that's a steak and that's the button, right? So it's made that zone 2, and all the data that's captured off of that and when it needs to be serviced and all of that capability now becomes accessible to us because it's in the cloud, right? Now we have to hook that all up and make sure we have the cloud computing services in order to capture all that data and use that data. But it opens up a whole frontier of now smart cooking equipment that's better for the guest, better for the team member, and we think that our guest engagement scores are going to go up tremendously.
And you're totally not wasting a lot of food, right? Because you're not, the food waste that you're saving on so much of that, the human error.
Human error, right?
Yeah.
Comps go down significantly. I mean, that's part of this entire business case of understanding, what actually pays for itself over time with this experience. It's guests, it's team member turnover, it's comps on the food, right? You go down the list of the business model and the inputs that make sense. And so it's not a small investment, right? It's tens and tens of millions of dollars in order to do this, but we do believe it opens us up for a future of really intelligent cooking, better experiences for the guests.
Right. And so earlier you alluded to the fact, Wade, that a lot of, sometimes you move, a lot of these companies, you guys being big brands, you move into something and then you realize we probably are better served moving in this other direction, right? So maybe there's a pivot or there's a tech that you test and you pilot and you think, this might be something big. And then you say, well, this is hotter over here, right? Would love to hear about some of those stories from each of you, like an anecdote, if you will. Wade, we can just keep going with you. And then
I'll kick off. Because you guys have probably, if anybody's heard me speak from stage, you've probably heard me talk about some of the innovation that we were doing several years ago. And COVID gave us an opportunity to really press the envelope in getting way out there. And things like drones and robots in the front of house and robots in the back of house and rovers that deliver your food on a sidewalk, right? And virtual brands and ghost kitchens. And while I believe in all of these aspects, I really do believe in my heart of heart, if you sit me down on the side of the road and just ask me what I think the future of restaurant is, I think all those things have a play. I think for us, it was to quickly learn and fail, either fail fast or become successful quickly. And what we found is that many of these things, the horizons were longer than we anticipated, or it was more than we could stomach as far as an investment and time. And so we just kind of pared back from many of those things and really just got right back to brass tacks. And I think a lot of organizations, it'd be interesting to hear from the rest in the room of this explosive technology that's hit us all through COVID. I'm seeing a lot of the brands start to kind of shuffle back a little bit and tighten that whole model up and say, okay, hold on. It's not technology for the sake of technology. What really makes either a better team member experience, better guest experience, drives profitability, or drives sales? Everything else is a little bit noisy. So I'm going to focus back on our business. And that's what I think we're doing now is we've had all this influx of tech. We're trying to get it seeded, organized, integrated, right? Make sure the systems are all talking before we kind of get to the next horizon, which I think is brewing on the future of another kind of tech rush to come at us in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and it's good to be able to pivot fast. That way you don't invest too much time in the wrong street, in the wrong road. And Vadim, you mentioned an innovation lab. What kinds of things, as Wade's saying, that maybe you've looked at and you've thought about it and you're like, okay, well, maybe we're not ready for that, but we're ready for this?
Yeah. Well, an innovation lab by definition is kind of way ahead of where it's at. And so we have to start thinking about, we already mentioned AI. So that's just going to be a feature. AI is not a project. It's just a feature of the product. So most people will not know that there's AI engine that's driving solutions, but pretty much every solution will have a component of that. We definitely looking forward to, robotics.
Yeah.
Like that's where, we all have labor pressures. We all see, that the scale needs to continue to improve. And so we're all looking forward to when machines start be more active in the kitchen. There's a lot of things happening, but we're kind of getting there. There's a lot of infrastructure that we have to build and we have to start getting ready for. So it's not just a machine. It's, well, how do you get orders to it? How do you get it to in real time? How do you clean up the data so that it actually does what you expect it to do? How do you monitor those things in your center? How do you service this? So there's just a lot of things that we have to work through. And that's where having it in the lab is a lot more valuable for us, as opposed to going in a restaurant, crash and burn, and sort of set yourself back a little bit.
Yeah.
So definitely we've seen a lot of traction with just testing those technologies before we're ready to put them even in a single lab.
Right.
But those are the kinds of things that we're looking at. And I think we mentioned the computer voice, the image for various degrees of image processing, whether it's serving the customer, whether it's in our kitchen environment.
Right. Team members and customers first. I mean, you have to kind of balance those two when you're looking at any tech initiative, I'm sure. Absolutely. Justin, let's switch to you and let's switch up the question a little bit. Let's talk about your challenges. And I would love to hear from everyone, really, like, dream big here. Like, what are your challenges and what do you wish existed that doesn't right now?
Dreaming big. I think a challenge is, for us, almost all our business is off premise, at least domestically or nationally. We have some dining, but so, where is that puck headed exactly, in terms of drivers and everything else? So, for us, dreaming big, it's a platform and it's technology enablement that can allow us to have, the right level of flexibility. I'll give you an example. One of my sons is a delivery driver. I'll withhold the name of the concept, and how fast he may or not get to the door. But his expectation, his first day on the job was like that he would have an app, and that it would like make his life easier. Because that's what he does in every other aspect of his life, and he didn't. And so it's I think about like dreaming big. It's like, how does that workforce that we're all, after, like we want to make their life as easy as possible. We want to make onboarding as easy as possible, the job as efficient as possible. So when I think of like technology, futuristic technology, or even stuff that maybe is in the exhibit center, I'm thinking of like, what is it that makes that team member's life awesome? Like awesome. Because, I think we look at the customer facing technology quite a bit, and, we've got a good sense of what the technology can do in like a lab or a manufacturing environment. But when it hits that restaurant, it hits the four walls. I think we're probably all finding some challenges in terms of like, how do we exploit it without, again, like, disrupting the unit economics of the restaurant. So just to give an example, like, robotics to us is, I'm not as far ahead as Wade and Vadim on this, but that's a massive, massive opportunity. But if it disrupts the customer experience, like if I can't customize, the thing I'm making as a I'm not sure that's a robotics sort of journey I want to have. Definitely drones, can't wait for the FAA to, continue to sort of allow that to progress, but huge potential for our business, I think, in terms of aerial-based flight and delivery.
That is so exciting. I mean, when you think about pizza delivery and the opportunity there for drones to take over that in any restaurant, just delivery is such a tough nut to crack, no matter which way you're going at it from. There's so many options, and it's such a big expense, and automating that is just like hugely. I mean, you've played around with drones. What was your experience, and what do you think? Like, we want you to dream big too. What is your challenge, and what are you looking for?
I mean, I love the drone thing. I'm totally fanboying over the drone stuff. I think it's the coolest thing in the world, and it's because we tried it out and we used it multiple times in different restaurants. But I think we've said it on stage. FAA's got to get a little bit more bullish and help the organizations, and it's got to get to scale, and the payloads have got to get bigger. I think, I got a big laundry list of dreams.
Yeah.
I mean, the basic is just like, how do I figure out a delivery companies that don't charge me an arm and a leg to get the food delivered off premise, right? I mean, like, I love the major players, but the reality is like, it seems like it's a battle every single time. We talked about, you mentioned it, right? You said some sales aren't as profitable as other sales when you're talking about the off-premise stuff, right? Yeah. And it's kind of, it cuts both ways. You need them, and you form relationships with them, and they're great, and they're helping you, but they take a pound of flesh, and we're the big guys, right? So we arm wrestle them. I can't imagine what it's like with a couple of 100 units or less, or, in a massive franchise situation where you're trying to, figure that out. So that's, just from the surface level, that's one idea. We really need AI ops in our organization. I know it exists. I know there's smart companies using it. Vadim, you're probably using it way more than a lot of companies, but we've got to get better at knowing when there's a problem, the alerts, and then the self-healing capability. In big organizations, we're deploying, we have deployments that happen on multiple fronts. And while we do our very best to follow a process and go, through the lab and QA it and then put it in a handful of restaurants and then deploy it, and we're not a franchise model, so most of our stores or restaurants are owned by us. But even that, we see things start to wobble, and all of a sudden you wake up a week and a half later and your conversion rate on a certain part of the page is down, and you're trying to figure out, well, what happened? And then you have this forensics of like a week with a couple of analytics people to try to figure out, okay, here's where we deployed this one release, and it actually had this issue, and now we're having a problem, right? So this world of like, Star Trek, computer, what's the problem? Solve the problem, right? As opposed to trying to dig in and grind through all of that ends up taking so much out of your day, as opposed to just running great, restaurants and delivering great food to customers. I often think the third one, and then I'll pass it off, is this idea about integration. So as we went through COVID, there were all these really cool innovators that jumped into the restaurant space, and just amazing technology, and many of them are in the room and in the space, but they were one-off, I'll call them point-to-point solution providers. And so what ended up happening is they weren't all integrated. And so some of them did the work to integrate with the POS system, or some of them did the work to integrate with the KDS system, or some of them did the work to integrate with our delivery systems, but not our totality. And so we were left with, oh my gosh, we got, 50 different plugs and no surge protector to plug them all into, right? And so we've had to go and find vendors, and there's not that many, and then wrap our services around it so that we have the luxury of being able to plug in these different providers and the data to seamlessly flow. So, if I'm just telling you what my wish list would be, someone start a company that has a full integration that can come in and sit on top of our organization and just integrate everything without me having to worry about it. That's what I would ask for.
That is amazing. What a great idea. Yeah, Vadim.
Yeah, that's a tall order. That's pretty cool. Although we do call our strategy Connected Restaurant, and that's for that reason. And so that's definitely aspirational. We had a session yesterday to talk about that. I would say, where are we going? So, and what do we not have today? So our aspiration is really 100% digital transactions and no 100% of those customers. So that's a really, really tall order, but that's where it's at. So how do we find all those points, and how do we turn those points into digital transactions? Okay, so let's think about that. We're all going to, 20%, 30%, 70%. I think we heard yesterday, 70% digital. So what about 100% digital? What does that look like, and how does that transform our industry? And then you want to know 100% of those customers. They might come in different ways, but can we aggregate that data in a way that we can trace? Oh, okay, well, this is the customer. They came in before, they had a great experience. Maybe they didn't. They are VIPs or they are not. Here's the things they like. Here's the things they prefer. So that kind of an interaction is a complete departure from, say, 10 years ago, when all we knew was somebody come in, pay with cash and leave. And so definitely from an aspiration standpoint, that's where we're going.
And we're getting closer. Don't you think we're getting closer with AI and the models and the way that they're able to sort of, I mean, obviously privacy is always, I always think about privacy when I'm thinking about knowing the customer and trying to sort of connect all these dots. I have to worry about all that too. But I mean, if technology can get smarter and learn.
Well, definitely. I think that's where we can unleash all this data, all these tools. It starts with data. If you don't have data, you can't do it. But assuming the data comes, then we have to do it. We have to do it in a very responsible way. And so security and privacy, I mean, these are huge topics. But there's also no denying that this is an opportunity for all of us. Mm-hmm. And we've seen in pandemics, when the doors closed, all we were left with, digital interaction with our customers.
Right.
So that continues for sure.
True loyalty started years ago, and it was about identifying transactions. Like, people thought it was a continuity program and things, but true digital elements were really about tracing the consumer in some aspect to better know them, right? And once you got rid of the hashed credit card stuff back in the early 2000s because of privacy issues and insecurity, you're constantly now chasing. Either you build this massive loyalty program to try to get everybody involved so you can trace them, or you get to a tokenization element now. And that's where we've started to lean into is, can we tokenize those transactions in such a way, not to be creepy big brother, but just to know what are Angela's occasions, right? Mm-hmm. Is she interested in drinking at the bar tonight with friends? Is she coming in with family? Or does she just want to grab something on the way home? And can we entice her, encourage her to actually engage with us better? If we don't have that data, and that's what I think where you were going, you're at a loss. You're just guessing. I'll just throw emails or text into the wind and hope that it happens to land on an occasion of one of my guests at the right time. And it's very inefficient and super, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And to your point, Vadim, doing that is defeating the purpose of getting to know the customer and giving them what they want, when they want it, how they want it, like the communications, even creating the fandom that makes them feel like they, are attached to your brand rather than just a lot of noise. You want to, if you don't know them, you can't customize those types of. And I imagine with pizza, it's a little bit easier because you're not, it's, what kind of pizza what's your favorite and where do you want it? Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit less.
I think though that we're at a juncture in sort of, our evolution, I think, just as a restaurant industry, where it's also never been easier to do the wrong thing and to, just throw technology at all these different sort of channels where the customer is. So let me give an example. So, marketing tech, ad tech, ordering tech, post-ordering tech. So like tipping, rating, the survey you get by text message or on the receipt or in the email, the experience you have when you call in because that, your order was late or you need to change something, the experience you have at the curb, all those are digitally enabled sort of, full funnel experiences, right? And sometimes, what I've seen, in various brands, including even in our own history, has been it's disconnected departmentally and it's disconnected strategically and sometimes architecturally. So just really it's like the basic stuff, but following the customer all the way through the journey and saying like, okay, what's their experience in Snap and Instagram, on Google search, the text message they got, like how does that translate to like downloading the app and then deep linking? And then again, through the post-order experience, that is harder to do. And it's also just a huge opportunity too, because if you make that easier, like you're going to build that stickiness and that loyalty, regardless of whether you have like an amazing loyalty program or not, like customers ordering again from you is loyalty. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, like the ability to do stuff wrong easily is a challenge for all of us.
Yeah. And definitely a stumbling block and a way to learn fast on what not to do. There's so many ways you can trip it up, right?
Yeah. I think it goes to the way we work is changing. We used to have tech projects. We used to have marketing projects. We used to have operations projects. Well, now they're just projects, right? And you can't implement literally anything without marketing, technology, operations all aligned on what's the customer experience and what's the team member experience.
Right.
We've had a couple of deployments recently that we put tech in the restaurant, and that's exactly what we found out. Is that we came back to it, it wasn't that the tech didn't work necessarily. It's because, but we didn't have all the stakeholders at the table strategically on what we were trying to accomplish to start with. We didn't know what the pain points were from ops or what we were trying to really solve.
Yeah.
We thought we were trying to solve something else. And now if you know, again, I told you guys, we came out of that restaurant leadership yesterday. That was one of the key topics. It's like, get the right stakeholders in the room, almost like an executive sponsorship before you push some technology into the restaurant to really understand what are you trying to solve and then go solve that problem. But everything happens kind of strategically. If it doesn't, you've got different initiatives, different people are pushing for different things, and then it just ends up being a tech for the sake of tech, and they're not integrated or connected, and the guest suffers.
Right. When you don't have all that universal buy-in.
You might have like amazing arrival detection and geolocation technology, but if the restaurant is understaffed at that day part and they can't run the order out,
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. And then you've actually made the problem worse.
Yeah. And when we think about labor, we haven't really touched on that yet. This is kind of off the cuff, but I would love to know, thinking about that, staffing is just so critical, right? And we all know through the pandemic, there were shortages and people were trying, I think, understanding and more patient because they knew, I mean, at least I guess because I'm hypersensitive to it because I'm in the industry, but I think we all kind of got that restaurants were a little slower because they didn't have the staff, and it's just the way of the new world, right? So how are you doing? Is there anything with technology that you have found that is uniquely solving for sort of the labor challenge? Vadim, we can start with you.
Well, I think through pandemic and quarantines, we found that the most important people in our business are our team members. I mean, we knew that, but it was just another wake-up call and reminder. Technology is in some ways an answer to make that labor problem a little bit easier and help those team members. So definitely when we start talking about robotic automation, that's going to help because it can automate the most mundane tasks, the most dangerous tasks in a restaurant, the most, it can also help us potentially extend the working hours. Maybe you can open it a little bit earlier because you can find enough people for that shift because the robotics is also there to help you out. Whether it's taking orders, whether it's preparing food, whether it's helping serve the customers, depending on the case in the industry. So we're certainly looking at that. We mentioned the artificial intelligence and things about, can we predict the schedules? Because that can help a lot. Just appropriate staffing reduces a lot of challenges in the restaurant, but that requires very complex algorithms. You need to do it across, in our case, thousands of restaurants, and you need to do it down to almost down to the minute, because it doesn't matter if you do it for a day. You need to do it even within the shift. You have to be very precise.
Right.
And that's really hard to do in our industry because you have all the spikes, and now with digital orders, it's very difficult to do. So I'll probably stop there. It's a long list.
The analytics have to match up to the labor in such an intense way.
Absolutely.
I mean, everything that you're doing has to match that demand for what the manpower you need for that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we mentioned the apps and the ways that our employees can talk to, amongst to their management and amongst themselves.
Yeah. How about you, Justin?
Yeah.
Anything unique in the way of just employee communications or the way you're recruiting or hiring or making sure you have enough folks in your organization?
I think Vadim nailed a lot of these things. I mean, I think we'd all take probably a great GM, over a great tech in some cases, because it does start with culture and it does start with leadership. Like that's the number one thing. So when we think about it, we think, okay, what is the GM doing that they shouldn't be doing or they don't have to be doing? And just like being like so like focused, laser focused and fastidious on removing that. And technology is usually a huge part of that, making their life easier because that GM is the quarterback of the entire environment. He or she is creating that culture. There are really amazing technologies though, recruiting and ATS platforms have really stepped it up, but we're all using the same thing. So what's the differentiator? It's the ease of the GM's day-to-day job, and how can we use technology to sort of drive that equation?
Right. Make them happier on the daily. Arm them with enough information that they need to solve the problems they can and forget the problems that they don't need to worry about.
It's very similar. We streamline the application process so you don't have to fill out 2 pages of information, right?
Yeah.
Quick stuff so the GMs can actually hire the right team members at the right time. The staffing feels like, from a macro perspective, it started to come back for us in the casual dining space. I wouldn't say it's 100% back to where it needs to be, but it's much better than it ever has been prior. Even we're probably close to where we were prior to COVID. We're always going to be gapped in the restaurant. That's just the reality of restaurants, but we're kind of back to that place. Justin made a comment that I think is just spot on, which is I take a GM every single day over a new technology or a really good operator. We've done our best to simplify. So in a world where you're pressed because you don't have enough labor in the restaurants and you don't see the end of this world coming, right? We were aligned a couple of years ago. You just try to do everything you can to make the job easier. And that gave us permission to be like, time out. Do we need to have, add 25 things to the Cajun chicken pasta? Like, we don't need to allow the guests to add extra green onions. Like, no one cares. Like, take that off the website, right? Because it's just blowing up our operations team in the kitchen because not every order is consistent. So we did a lot of like super simplifying the restaurant. And that was driven, under the leadership of Kevin Hochman, who came in from the Yum group. And really kind of just said, hey, get streamlined, get simplified, make it easier for operations, and then listen. Go out on tours and listen to the team members and listen to the managers and find out where the pain points are. And then let's come back, let's rack and stack those. And that's where we should put our capital to solve those issues, either with technology or process, as opposed to, hey, Wade Allen had a great idea because he was sitting at his desk and he saw something online that was cool, right? I think getting that kind of alignment has made a world of difference for not only our restaurant ops, but also for the labor to be able to deliver in our restaurants to provide a great guest.
Yeah. We don't have much time left. We have almost 4 minutes. I would love to hear just, as we wrap up here, what are you most passionate about, like for the future of restaurant technology or in your own brands or even just in the industry in general? We'd love to hear what's exciting you these days, Vadim.
I think one thing we didn't mention is our relationship with franchisees, and for many of us, it's very important. As much as we like, we showed Diffly, and it's just a fantastic concept in the restaurant, and we were very fortunate to have the architecture connected restaurant to bring it all to life. But people ask us, how did you come up with that idea? And the truth is, we didn't. The franchisees did.
I know that's an incredible story.
So I think that aspect and that building that relationship could be a huge enabler. And not only asking them permission, but also asking them for ideas. And those ideas could come very deep within the organization or even outside, like in this case, from your partners.
That's fantastic. I mean, aggregating all those ideas across the franchisees and getting them to the right folks that can say, great, that's a diamond, that's a little nugget of greatness in that idea. That even is a project, right?
Yeah.
The technology can fuel, just aggregating all the information and ideas from your biggest supporters, franchisees.
Or within the organization.
Yeah.
I think finding those diamonds in a rough is like there's every day you open up, there's like thousands of different choices and hundreds of different options for you. How do you wade through them? How do you select the ones that really make a difference at the end of the day?
Yeah, the Diffly is a fantastic example of that. Just all the stars aligning for that.
Yeah, and there's other things. It's just how do you get through the noise to get to something that really matters?
Yeah. And Justin, how about you? What are you most passionate and excited about moving forward?
I mean, just reflecting on that, like what other world do you have dozens and even hundreds of entrepreneurs and CEOs who are willing to give you advice? And maybe it's not always, it's always well-intentioned perhaps, but it may not be the right technology advice. But like we've gotten so many great ideas from our franchisees. But then how do you like take that to your team members? If you think about a technology team member, why do you work in the restaurant industry? You should love food. You really should. Like you should want to be in the restaurant. And so especially as we're acclimating more folks and new folks coming into the office or just joining the team virtually, whichever it is, but helping them like be in the restaurant or go to our supply chain environment or like live a day in the brand's life and then go back and like weave that into their routine as a technologist or as a technology leader. Man, I get really excited about that.
That's pretty cool. That's a great idea. I love that.
I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so I get most excited about conferences like this where I can sit and then walk the floor and see all the amazing, cool ideas that have come up. Because I could never even fathom some of the ideas that have come into this space in the last couple of years, right? So that's why I get really excited. Being in this industry for the better part of a decade and a little bit longer because of some consulting work that I did prior to, it has massively changed. this show has magically changed, right? This whole experience is totally different. And so every time I get a chance to take just even a day and spend time with some great technology companies, but also see what other awesome brands are doing, because you can see them from a distance, but you're not ingrained in it. That's when I get super excited, because this industry is far from actually getting to the point of where it's saturated or grow up to where it needs to be. It's going to continue to press forward. We're going to continue to have phenomenal tech. That's what gets me up every morning.
And that is where we will leave it, folks. Thank you so much for joining me on the stage today.